Hello and welcome to today's webinar. So today, hopefully you are joining us for practical solutions for on-site flex. And as we know, the construction industry is and continues to lag behind when it comes to some working practices. So whilst many of our desk-based colleagues are enjoying hybrid working arrangements to varying levels of success, our site-based colleagues are wondering how they can have any type of flexibility and how they might have a better work-life balance. And we at TimeWise call this the flex haves and the flex have-nots. Those who can and do have flexibility versus those who are not able to have flexibility, which is creating this two-tier workforce. So to put today's webinar into context, in construction, and I don't need to, I'm sure, tell most of you this, but we've got an aging workforce. So around a quarter of our workforce in construction are going to retire in the next 10 to 15 years. And we're already seeing that trend, particularly in a post-pandemic world, where the biggest reason for leaving the industry now is retirement. That is creating and has created, as we know, a massive skills shortage. But unfortunately, we're remaining unattractive to people who could fill that gap. So we are not attractive to those underrepresented groups who could help us fill that skills shortage. With our less than 15% of the workforce are women, and it hasn't changed significantly in 25 years. That's despite all of the effort and the energy that has gone into increasing the number of women coming into the industry. And well-being is also a significant issue for us, with £160 million lost in sickness absence over the year. Rates of male suicide are higher in construction than in any other industry, and our working practices are physically and mentally demanding, with a continued long hours, presenteeism-based practices. We know at TimeWise that flexible working is a key enabler to helping the industry be more attractive to underrepresented groups. It can help support our colleagues as they are heading towards retirement so they could work for longer, and it can improve all of our colleagues' health and well-being. But, big but, it's not easy, otherwise we would have all done it by now. So we're going to tackle some of these key challenges and questions today and think about how you can really make flexible working work in your site-based roles. So joining me today, I have a fantastic panel of speakers who have at varying stages of their flexible working journey. So we have Thomas from Graham Construction, Hannah from Henry Boot, Catherine from Lend-Lease, and Alpa from Balfour Beatty. And I will come to you now to introduce yourselves, please. So Thomas, do you want to go first?
Hi guys, my name is Thomas Trainer. I'm the head of HR at Graham Construction. We have been supported by TimeWise in rolling out workshops to our site-based teams, taking feedback and developing managers' toolkits, amongst other initiatives to really try to promote and encourage flexibility for those site-based staff. In support with what Nicholas just said, we had found that, COVID had been a big driver for our office-based flexibility. And that really led to, the business thinking differently about flexibility because it could work in the office. So it gave us an in terms of, well, if this is working for office-based staff, where once upon a time that would have been frowned upon, how can we be more flexible? What can we do? How can we support site teams and empower them to roll out some flex across their projects and teams? So, yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Thomas. Catherine, I'm going to go clockwise. So, Catherine, coming to you. Oh.
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Mooney at Lend-Lease. Yeah, great to be here. So, I've worked in the industry for quite some time, sort of 15 years, and I have seen a lot of change over that period of time. My role in Lend-Lease now, I'm the senior business partner, so I sit on the construction leadership team. I'm really looking to try and influence in the flex space, how we can really attract and retain the best people. We've been working with TimeWise probably the last 6 months. Similarly, doing workshops. We're just about to roll those out next week, but also really thinking about how we can operate a sort of a consistent approach in terms of flexibility to attract and retain the best people, and also hopefully look to see mental health improve amongst our workforce in site-based operations as well.
Thank you. Alpa, coming to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Alpa Kapasi. I'm the Quality, Diversity and Inclusion Lead, working on the HS2 project up in Old Common in Northwest London. So my parent company is Balfour Beatty. And I guess from a perspective of flexible working, we have introduced policies around agile working in our site, sorry, not our site-based, our office-based teams. However, we are struggling with challenges with regards to our site-based staff. So what I'm hoping to share with you later today is some of the complexities around that, some of the challenges that we're facing, and also some of the approaches that we've taken to try and address that, and really looking forward to learn from others on the call in terms of approaches that others have taken. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alpa. Hannah?
Yeah, morning everyone. My name is Hannah Rowland. I'm Organisational Development Manager at Henry Boot. So we've been working with TimeWise as well over the past few months and have been especially focusing on site colleagues. We know from our engagement surveys that our site people are feeling a really different experience at work to people who are in the office, and what we're trying to do is discover how we can make flex work better for people out on site and in operational roles. So we've already done some of that work, and we're now in a position of hopefully rolling that out more widely. So happy to share some of the good, some of the bad of where we've been and where we might go to, and keen to learn from others.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us this morning with your varied experiences of things that have and haven't worked. So why should we flex? So in 2021, TimeWise worked on a Construction Pioneers programme, which was supported by Build UK. And as part of that, we worked with 4 construction firms to pilot more flexible ways of working on site. And that was part of our research and insights programme to understand the enablers and the barriers to flexibility in construction. And what happened throughout the course of that pilot, or those pilots, which lasted around 18 months, was that different ways of working were trialled. So that included things like team-based rostering, staggered start and finish times. We implemented job and done or outputs, looking at outputs, not hours, at one organisation, rotating flexi days, supported by pods of people who could kind of cover for one another. And since then, we've worked with dozens of organisations to design and support more flexible ways of working. And the results of our work have been overwhelmingly positive. So we found that in implementing more ways of flexible working, improvements have been made to particularly health and well-being. So that we saw through the pilot programme, we saw an improvement of 35% of those people who said, my working time allows me to look after my health and well-being. On one pilot, we found that sickness absence reduced by, on average, 2 days per person during the course of the pilot programme. And we found that there was no detrimental impact on productivity, cost, or health and safety. But first, I'd like you to answer a poll for us. So I'd be really keen to get you involved in the session and understand how important is flexible working for your own site-based employees. Give you a minute to be able to vote for that.
Answers coming in thick and fast.
Excellent. Brilliant. I mean, I guess I'm speaking to the converted slightly in that you've signed up for today's programme, but it's great to see that actually for most of you it is important, and you're recognising that it is important for your colleagues that are based out on site. As we've all said, I think we've seen post-pandemic, there is an even greater split between the different types of working. So those people who can work flexibly, they're working in offices, they're able to kind of work from home occasionally. They're also able to flex their hours a little bit more, but the same is not being felt by our on-site colleagues. And the benefits that they could receive from that is great. So on that note, I'm going to come to the panel and ask, Catherine, maybe I'll come to you first on this one. What have you found, or what are you finding are the benefits of providing flexible working?
firstly, I mean, one of the key reasons and the catalyst for us doing this is really to attract and retain the best people. We really want to try and change the face and you know, the demographic and the diversity within our business. And one of the key ways is to really hit those untapped talent pools that you've talked about. So that was one of the sort of catalysts for really doing this. Some of the benefits, you know, we are starting to see that happening. So we're able to talk to the offering that we now have. I think one of the challenges we found is that we weren't able to necessarily articulate how flexibility was to apply on our sites. And the work that we've recently done has allowed us to be able to do that in a much more consistent fashion amongst our managers and our real on-site, you know, middle management and those that are really interviewing. And for us, that's sort of the brand, and that's people, you know, the face of the business. So that's really one of the key benefits. I think the other thing is really leaders being able to walk the walk and also, you know, flex themselves. And I think over time we are starting to see that happen. You've really got to lead by example, which is, you know, providing leaders with a much more flexible approach to their way of working as well. So we're really seeing it twofold, not only in the offices but also, you know, actually on-site benefits too.
Fantastic. And I know you're kind of early on in your journey. Perhaps Hannah or Thomas, you're a bit further on, having kind of implemented some ways of working. What sort of benefits have you guys seen?
Yeah, I can talk to that one. I think one of the big ones for us has been around well-being. So that was one of the drivers for us doing this work, as well as diversity and kind of talent attraction. But as I mentioned, excuse me, we were seeing in our engagement surveys that people on site were feeling a very different experience, and most of that was around their ability to balance their well-being, taking time for themselves and being with family. And come on to challenges, I know, but one of the big things has been about trying to enable people to see that it's okay to take time for themselves and to spend time with family as well as do work. So a huge one for us, and through the work we've already done, is we've seen a shift in people now feeling that that is okay to do, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see one of my colleagues has popped. We did an article recently, which was about, shouldn't frontline workers get to attend school assemblies too? And that kind of the impact that can have on people's well-being, because they have that flexibility to be able to attend some of those kind of, for any of the parents out there, the multiple things that happen at school and the assemblies and the this and that. Yeah. Great. Thomas, coming to you, kind of what benefits have you guys seen at Graham?
Yeah, I would support what Hannah said in terms of, you know, that real focus on well-being and work-life balance. You know, and there is this nearly perception that flexibility is only for parents or, you know, for people with caring responsibilities. And we've actually found whenever you actually go out and talk to people right across the board, that when people are encouraged to look after themselves, you know, whether it be someone who wants to go to the gym or of an evening, or whether it's someone who wants to come in a bit later because they walk the dog in the morning or whatever. But those are a more rounded, balanced, and you're getting the best from those people. So there has been a real shift in attitude around what can and can't be offered, and empowering managers, and I suppose making it okay for site staff to ask, not be afraid, and having that trust in place where essentially if people are working long hours and working on very challenging projects, there does need to be a bit of give and take, and it's not about presenteeism, and that whole culture that is definitely very much in place within, I feel, within the construction industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just share a little anecdote from one of the pilots that I worked on with another construction firm, which was just that. It was almost actually the biggest shift was in that kind of that mindset piece of, oh, I don't have to be on site until 7 o'clock at night. It's okay to leave. And it was just the work that we did with them there was, it was one particular manager who was fairly old school, let's go for, and it was like a revelation to him. He was just like, do you know what? It's not that I'm not even leaving early. I'm just leaving when I'm supposed to leave. I'm just leaving on time. And that means my wife, he was like, my wife's like, what are you doing home at this time of day? He was like going home and having some time with his wife and like having a sit down meal with her. And it completely just changed his outlook of, oh, I understand now why we're talking about this. Alpa, do you want to come in terms of other benefits as well? And then Hannah, sorry, I see you've got your hand up, so we'll come to you next.
Yeah, so I think I would repeat and echo what everybody else has said. So prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, the culture or the expectation very much on our project and across Balfour Beatty and our parent companies was very much that you're working 5 times a day. I'm sorry, 5 days a week. So when I joined the project, my expectation was that I'd be attending the office or attending site 5 days a week. COVID, of course, changed all of that. And so then the narrative changed after that. And when we started talking about lockdown being eased and coming back into the office, I think the benefits, and the benefits are not just for women. Quite often we think about flexible working, we're always associated with benefits for women. Actually, what we heard from our workforce was that actually was benefiting everybody across the workforce. And some of the case studies that we've used to demonstrate the benefits of it are actually older people. So older people, more mature people who've been in the workforce for quite a long time, who've got that flexible working, which just enables them to continue working, but at the same time, having that work-life balance so that they can take time out as well. So I think the benefits have been just, as everybody else has said, is better work-life balance. It's about the well-being, but it is part of that larger program, that wider program around inclusion. So I think that's only been the benefits for us. And in terms of our site workforce, we are hearing from the ground that people have got expectations, are wanting to introduce more flexible working on site. And so that's our priority now in terms of thinking about what that means and how we make that work.
Thank you. Thanks, Alpa. Hannah, you wanted to say?
Yeah, it was just to build on the point around shift of mindset. I think we found in the early stages when we were talking about taking time for yourself, it really opened up a conversation about people just questioning, well, what on earth would we do with that time if we had it anyway? So a real kind of conversation starter around, well, we've never had that. It's been this way for 30 or 40 years. And actually, we don't even know what we'd do with ourselves if we could leave an hour late, earlier to go to the gym, or if we could go golfing on a Wednesday, in the morning before we get. So I think it was much broader than just a work conversation. It became actually how would that then impact our lives in real terms? And to Alpa's point, there was even some conversation around male and female roles. Not just traditionally being about childcare or caring responsibilities, but also men able to have time off and be with families. And that was great and something people didn't expect, I think, at the start of this. So, yeah, really good.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. So let's talk about types of flexible working and what does it actually look like on site? So lots of people, I'm sure, have joined today to go, okay, so how do you actually do it? What do you do? So just when we talk about flexibility, I want to just kind of caveat it around a lot of what we hear is talking about kind of location-based flexibility these days. So we hear a lot about hybrid working, office working, etc. All very valid, but what we want to focus on today is the other forms of flexibility. So at TimeWise, we talk about flexibility as being about the where, the when, and the how much. What we're going to focus on today is a lot of the where, and sorry, not the where is what we're not going to focus on. We're going to focus on the when and the how much. So how can you flex within the parameters of working hours? So when would be that full-time flexibility? So this is not people who are reducing the hours of work that they do, but it's doing those hours in a different time of day. So I'd be really keen to understand what types of flexibility have you seen on your sites to start off with, and then I wanted us to get into a conversation about informal flex as well. So who wants to take a start? Hannah, shall we come with you? What types of flexibility have you sort of seen on site?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the most surprising thing for me and maybe everyone involved was it was nothing groundbreaking. So I think at the start there was probably a level of expectation when we started. We piloted the approach with 3 sites. We had a large, middle, in site, and then a smaller one. And there was probably quite high expectations, and that I think was around some of the myths that exist around what flex is, and people expecting we were going to magically be able to say have a work from home day, and so I think a lot of it was actually just really getting into conversation about what could it be? What is it? What are you already doing? And it was actually smaller flex and informal flex that we found was, things we've already described that Thomas mentioned around being able to go to the gym on lunch, or leaving an hour earlier, or actually shifting those hours of work and having overlap so that people could cover the full day. Or on a Friday, I think particularly when it was quieter in the afternoon, teams being able to say, right, well, we've done the work for this week, we're ready for next week, let's get off. So it was nothing groundbreaking or unusual, I would say, but definitely just more of that acknowledgement of what flex was that we talked about, and then that permission that people felt they needed to go away and just do it.
Yeah.
Just try. Yeah.
Absolutely. Catherine, I think you came off mute. Did you want to come and say something?
A couple of the, I mean, obviously there's twofold, as you say, there's the formal flexibility and then also informal flexibility. And what we've been seeing, particularly with day one flex, and, legislation changes coming up in April, what we've seen is more and more formal requests for flexibility. So that was sort of partly the reason for thinking around more of an informal way. So how can we think about team-based flexibility that might then, work best for the team and the individual, but, suiting business needs as well as individual needs. So that was one of the reasons for doing, and obviously the work with TimeWise that we've started. So that's the sort of the formal piece. And then in terms of the informal things that we are doing and just about to launch, so it is very early days for us at Lend-Lease, is really thinking around having 2 shift patterns. So you might have an A team and a B team. It's the mentality, a bit touched on it earlier, as to not having, you might have 10 or 15 people in your team. All 10 or 15 don't necessarily, obviously thinking about disciplines, but they don't all necessarily need to be there from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. So actually looking at the disciplines and breaking it down into your construction teams, your commercial teams, your design, and really thinking about a team-based approach as to what they need to produce. And based on what they need to produce, what could that mean by way of working pattern? So a couple of other things were team-based, maybe a compressed fortnight, so 9 into 14. And then also obviously reduced hours, part-time hours, and shorter shift patterns. So, particularly you might have a 7:30 till 3:30, 8:30 till 4:30. So considering different shift patterns based on those different disciplines are some of the things that we've considered.
Fantastic, thank you. Thomas, sorry.
Yeah, exactly what Catherine's just said. Just, summarising that up, do all of your site staff need to be on site all of the time? So breaking those roles up in terms of what are the essential roles. Is there a project manager and a site manager? Do they always have to be on site together? And looking at all of those roles and deciding what flexibility can work around those. As I say, we find that there was nothing groundbreaking at all in terms of what Hannah to support what you've just said. But whenever we actually had gone out and rolled out some of the workshops, some of the examples of flex or informal flex were really amazing. And what I would say is it's just about sharing those ideas and getting, whenever we got people in their room and what was working on some sites, so we haven't thought about that, and actually empowering managers to be able to make those decisions and really, I suppose, look at other alternatives rather than those 13-hour days for all staff all of the time. Can your planners work remotely? Can your commercial staff work remotely? Do all of your site teams have to be on site all of the time? Are they, say, for example, supporting with some quality paperwork? Can that be done at home? The health and safety side of things. So it's just about taking a very broad approach to it, but something that whenever you actually get in under the skin of what people are doing and how they're doing it, it's about challenging those mindsets, some of the dinosaurs, really. Yeah,
thank you. I'm just going to quickly, we asked a poll to see if anyone that's joined us, if they have different types of flexible working. So let's just see the answers to that, and then I'll come to the conversation. So types of working. Yes. So helpfully you have supported a theory or a hypothesis that I have around informal and ad hoc flexibility, which is that is clearly the kind of the biggest type of flexibility that your staff have. Although it's great to see that there is quite a distribution of flexibility across in terms of flexible shift patterns, compressed hours, staggered start and finish. Only a small proportion of you not doing any of those currently. So that's great, thank you. And I think it's really, two things are really interesting from the conversation. So one is that you don't sort of view it as groundbreaking, whereas actually it is very groundbreaking because this is a cultural shift and a cultural change for the industry. So whilst the actual changes might feel small, the shift in mindset to get to that point of having that flexibility, re-looking at just ways of working and thinking, well, you know, who does need to be on site all of the time? What activities are they doing there? How could we design those roles differently so not everybody needs to kind of like machine-like go and be in the same place at the same time all of the time? So firstly, don't put yourselves down. It is actually pretty groundbreaking, even if it feels small. And then the second conversation I'd really like to get into, because we often hear there's lots and lots of informal ad hoc flex that goes on across the industry, and that's supported by the poll as well. But it's not, unless you work for that organization or unless you work for that specific team, we don't know about it. So what could we do to shine a light on the types of flexibility that actually do exist and happen quite frequently across construction, to try and almost break the image that people have externally of us, that it's not a place you can go where you want to work flexibly? What could we do to kind of celebrate some of that flexibility or that informal flex? Thomas, I think you had some ideas, so I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, well, as I say, it's a bit like I said earlier. It's a bit about the example of the young person asking for flexibility to go to the gym in the morning. And that has obviously been put in place. Now that guy comes in to work a bit later and you could say much more energized and more efficient. But it's just about obviously making those options available. But what I would say is it's about that education piece in terms of empowering managers to know that they can offer that flexibility and promote that flexibility on site. So that's for me, that was a real eye opener whenever we actually had gone out and asked for some examples. We have a lot of mobile staff that are traveling and living away from home and working away from home, and they're obviously staying in accommodation and things like that. So it's about, perhaps they're starting later on a Monday, or maybe not flying into a Tuesday and working from home on the Monday. And that's absolutely fine, because they're spending more time with their families. But are they able to carry out their job? Are they efficient? Are they adding value? Yes, is the answer to all of those things. They're obviously much more grounded and happier. Ideally they wouldn't be working away from home at all, but the construction industry is one where that is obviously the nature of the job. So yeah, we actually find that, as I say, in terms of those informal flex examples, people maybe take an extended lunch break. There was a father in one of the projects that, he had caring responsibilities every other week. So in terms of school runs and things like that, by allowing him to do the school runs in the morning was really, really, really important to him. And he wouldn't have been able to do this otherwise, and had never been offered that flexibility before. Just wasn't an option, but that was really life-changing, he felt, to him, in terms of single parent, in terms of sharing that responsibility and all of those things. As I say, lots of really good examples out there. But as I say, it's just about ensuring that your managers are empowered to make those decisions, but and are aware of the various different options that are available, and that anything's on the table, and be open to suggestions rather than having that closed book approach.
Yeah, thank you. Alpa, coming to you.
Yeah, so I was just really going to reinforce some of those points. And I think I think it's really important to see this very much as part of that wider program of kind of culture change and behavioral change. And I think whilst we can have all the policies and you can have training and so on, I think it's very much about essentially being able to bring it to life for people. So people think about flexible working, they immediately think about remote working or, you know, people working shorter hours, compressed hours, etc., and it being about women. And so I guess one of the things that we've tried to do is to bring it to life through the use of case studies, through our various comms channels, raising awareness of the different types of arrangements that we have in place, which may have been informal, but at the same time, they're having a huge impact on people's lives and their kind of working patterns. And so bringing it to life for people, showing managers what is possible can often be enough to nudge them in the right direction to say, actually, maybe you could try thinking about this differently. And so I think it is about culture change, it's about changing the narrative and really encouraging people to think outside of the box and be a bit more creative, but doing it by giving them examples of good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sharing of stories, isn't it? And that kind of just awareness of that it does exist. Hannah.
Yeah, just a really quick one on that culture change piece. So when we were trialing with the sites that we chose, we did find that those manager conversations that we approached in a coaching way were critical. Because, you know, at the start we sat down, briefed them, gave them the tools, and there was a little bit of time where actually nobody did anything, even though permission was given, even though, and that's the bit I think around the managers also coming along on the journey of understanding it, wanting to do it to varying degrees. So being really honest, I think there's a lot of investment and time needed with those leaders and managers to help them through the change of approach as well, and to be alongside them. So we really, you know, spent time out on sites, you know, in the porter cabins, sat alongside saying, well, what's gone well this week? What hasn't gone well this week? Why is that? Because the first sign of a hiccup was when we go, oh, we're going to drop it. We're not doing it anymore. It's not working. I think just don't underestimate the investment of time, quite rightly, in coaching managers along to help them understand and role model and make the change. Yeah,
absolutely. And there's part of that which is an awareness piece, and then there's part of that which is also a recognition from them of like, this is different and this is difficult. This is going to be harder, and there is that bridge to kind of get over. Catherine, you can say something.
Just to add, and a brief point really on how, like your question, how we can publicise it. I think one of the key things is really trust. So to enable this to happen, for us, we've found trust has been a barrier. So, you know, move away from the hypothesis of presenteeism that disprove that's not required. And I think the other bit is then job design. So really getting good at when we see good examples as how this plays out, and, you know, where it's, you know, productivity, as you say, we increase productivity or things are not hindered, and actually what you start to see is the benefits and reap the rewards through well-being, you know, reduced absenteeism, all the things that we would expect. We'll really then start to be able to design those roles because we know and we have the proof that we can, you know, they can work in such a way. So then it's really around your job descriptions, and it starts really early on as part of your value proposition. This is the offering that we have in the flexible space, and this is what we can offer within each role, and then really becoming more and more able to articulate that, and leaders and managers being able to articulate that on the front line. So I think that bit's going to play out in time, but that's the vision that we have, that we'll really embed it into our job design, we'll build it into our job descriptions, and really be able to create those based on what a flex role looks like.
And is part of it giving managers the language, do you think? Is part of it giving the managers the language of understanding what flex is, and that what they might not even consider to be flexible actually is?
Absolutely. I mean, that's been a barrier, you know, for us. That's what I've noticed. And I think part of it is the language, and right at the beginning, I sort of said it's the consistent approach. So we have really great, you know, good pockets of this that happen in our business and have happened for years, which comes down to managers and leaders that are able to articulate that and have got the language, but then others that haven't. And we're not then sharing best practices either. So I think it does, and what the framework that we've developed is going to allow is that, you know, people can really, you know, learn that framework, get to start to talk the language, start to practice, and really be able to first embed it within the teams that they've got now, but then also within the teams that they're going to build over time on new projects.
So we've started touching on it already, but I'm keen to kind of let's get into the kind of challenges and the nitty-gritty. So it's not easy to do this on site, and there can be, as we know, there can be resistance to it. So what maybe are some of the key challenges that you either are facing or have faced, and how either are you overcoming them, or how do you want to overcome them if you've not got there as yet? Alpa, I know you're working on a very complex project with lots of moving parts, like literally as well as metaphorically. So I'll come to you first.
Thank you. Yes, so it is incredibly complex. So I don't want to take too much time describing the situation, but essentially what we have is a huge project that we're developing. It's one of the largest HS2 projects well, the largest infrastructure project, I believe, in this country at the moment. So we're based up in northwest London. And so essentially what we've got is Balfour Beatty, Vinci and Sistra are the joint venture that are managing this project. That's the managing contractor. And then we have a supply chain of approximately 26 suppliers currently. So Balfour Beatty, Vinci, Sistra is a joint venture. We're tiny. We've got about 330 members of staff. In our supply chain, we've got about 1,500 people. So the challenge that we have, and in terms of diversity and inclusion and in terms of flex, is very much around whatever we do, we have to take our supply chain on that journey with us. We can't develop this inclusive organization without that supply chain working with us. And so we have to work in collaboration. That's key to everything that we do. And we have a great relationship with our supply chain. So there's lots of work that we're doing around our kind of culture change program, behavioral change program, etc. However, when it comes to flex and agile working, the challenge we have is that whilst we've introduced an agile working policy for the joint venture, which at the moment states that we have to be on site, we have to be in the office 60% of the time. So most people are on site minimum 3 days a week. The challenge we have, and we've talked about agile working, we've talked about how we can be creative with agile working, what that actually means. The challenge we have is that the supply chain obviously have their own employing companies with their own policies. And some of those companies, since we've moved out of the pandemic and as we're moving back into normal life, whatever that means, what's happening is there's been a bit of a backlash, I guess, to flexible working. And so increasingly, employers are telling their staff that they have to be back in the office or they have to be back on site 5 days a week. And so the challenge we have is that we've got that resistance where we've got some companies where their policies are that actually their staff have to be back on site. And so taking them with us on that journey, starting to have that conversation is a huge challenge. And the way in which we're kind of tackling it is building the conversation into our behavioral change program. So we've got a huge program that we're developing at the moment called the Respect Program, which is all about culture change, behavioral change, but then building into that, what does flex working, what does agile working actually look like, what are the benefits of it, and how can some of our site teams potentially start introducing those sorts of programs. But it is a huge challenge because we can't do it without them, but at the same time, we can't tell them that they have to do it. We can't mandate it. So it's that process of actually taking them on that journey with us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's ever more complicated for yourselves with that kind of that larger supply chain. But it is something that we often see. So we will often work with kind of the managing contractors, and then you have those you're responsible for, and you're working with all of that different supply chain. I wonder if anyone else is able to kind of give any insights on perhaps any challenges that we've got there, or any ongoing resistance with, like, how do you manage that kind of competing, whether that's client or supply chain sort of relationship? I've got any thoughts on that, Hannah?
I think we do have that as a challenge. So some of what came up in our work that we've done already is that site opening times are dictated by subcontractors when they want to be there. There's a keenness of subcontractors to be there on a Saturday when we don't necessarily want to be there. So I think we're in the very early stages of trying to have those conversations at the outset of projects to say, actually, this flex is important to us, it's important to our people for all of the reasons we've talked about. It's very early days, and it's going to take a lot of work to have those conversations and work through it, as well as then breaking those habits with our internal people to do different as well. So not necessarily loads of solutions yet, but it definitely is a challenge for us.
Definitely it's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it goes back to that mindset shift again, doesn't it? What we've always done versus actually how things might be different.
And what sort of challenges did you face, Thomas, when you started introducing this?
Yeah, some of them I think we sort of had touched on earlier, but the resistance from project teams in that we have to be on site 14 hours a day, and everyone has to be there, and we don't operate like you guys in the office, and them and us sort of scenario in terms of that expectation. But as I say, whenever you actually got people into a room and at the various different locations and pilots, and we actually tried to dig a bit deeper in terms of what was happening, they could actually see that there was probably been a little bit more flexibility, which allowed them to open up a little bit more to it. But certainly the similar experiences in terms of that supply chain, stakeholders, clients, and that is an ongoing thing. But it's like anything. It's like our CSR, our well-being, our fairness, inclusion, and respect. You start with your workforce, and then you try to obviously empower and roll that out. Yeah, and I think it's at about tiny little steps. And if we can change the mindsets, I think a lot of the initiatives that we're doing around some of our employee groups, getting them together to talk about, say things like females in construction or disability on site. It's about that culturally. It's about opening up those conversations and empowering the people on site to actually think about, well, can we do things differently? Should we do things differently? Is it right to work 14 hours a day, travel an hour and a half each way, 6 days a week? Sort of thing. So yeah, it's about that creative piece around getting those behaviors, changing those behaviors, challenging the status quo in terms of what the norm is or should be. But as I say, it's certainly a journey, and it's a journey that we need to continue on. And things like flexibility from day one, on the legislation, I think encourages a lot of what we're trying to promote. As I say, we're developing our manager's toolkit, the road shows, making it part of our Connect process, which is really our performance management twice yearly meetings, making those conversations. Flexibility forms part of that. So yeah.
And one final question on challenges, I think, which is, so what I often hear, or often some of that resistance comes from managers around productivity and or health and safety. So what we often hear, the very first thing that I often hear when I'm talking to kind of construction leaders around introducing more flexibility, there's that concern around, is this going to impact productivity? Is this going to impact our health and safety? How have you overcome some of that resistance? Because I'm sure that you had that same conversation.
I'm smiling because yes, we absolutely did have that conversation.
Go on, Hannah.
So yeah, and to be honest, in terms of measuring that, we're again still quite early days in terms of output, but how we've tried to overcome it is to say, look, you already have your kind of team meetings weekly, fortnightly, where you're together talking about the work that is needed to be done for the project, talking about when it's going to be busier, when it's going to be quieter. So build into that conversation also a conversation around what level of flex is desired and needed by the team, and create that as a team. So as long as you hold those boundaries around that being adaptable as the work shifts, if something comes in that actually sends that plan off track, then being able to get the team back together really quickly to relook at it and think, right, we need to adjust that for this week. So having it as a live conversation as a part of the operational discussions,
Yeah.
I think has stood us in good stead for minimising impact on productivity. My suspicion would be it hasn't altered, but we need to get into the measurement of that.
Measurement of it, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think yeah, similarly, we've when we've worked with other organisations, it's the parameters within which, so there's sort of the golden rules of, if there, it's at any point, this flexibility needs to be two-way. If at any point something goes wrong, we may all need to come back together again, or we may need to relook at what it is that we're doing. It isn't just a once and done kind of thing. So I'm conscious of time, and we've had a few questions in the chat. So I think or in the Q&A, should I say. So I'm going to try and answer some questions, and then I have one final question for the panel before we will close up for today. So I am going to come into the questions and have a look what we've got. So there's a question on measures of productivity. So someone's saying, what are the important measures of productivity? So when you're, obviously, Hannah, you mentioned you're kind of in early stages, and I don't know if anyone else has looked at this. What have you been measuring in terms of productivity? If you're able to answer that, and if not, sure.
Can I just come in here? So I think,
yes, please.
I think it's really hard. I mean, we've not got any hard measures of productivity, but I guess what we do look at is measures of inclusion. So we look at, for example, our employee engagement surveys, we look at our attrition rates, and actually when you've got high levels of engagement and people giving us really positive feedback about feeling valued, feeling that they're included as part of the team, etc. So those high levels of engagement coupled with lower attrition rates, I think gives you a fairly good indicator as to how people are generally feeling. And I think, the fact that when we've introduced agile working, what it's actually done is given people choice. And so people have that flexibility to know that they can work in different working patterns. It just makes such a huge difference to their productivity and to their loyalty and their kind of health sense of well-being in the project. But I think that those are the kinds of softer indicators that we can be looking at as opposed to hard measures of productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those kind of additional, as you say, softer discretionary effort that you get as a result of some of those things. So often it's the outcome of some of the things that you've done. In terms of specific measures of activity, some of our clients have looked at, we haven't introduced additional measures of productivity. What we've generally done is we've looked at what are the program KPIs already, and then keeping a track and a measure and a monitor of those as you would in normal circumstances. So yes, there might be delays to a project because something hasn't been delivered that needs to be delivered, for example. That's not as a result necessarily of flexible working. So it's trying to kind of look at it in the round with everything else. Is the project where you would still expect it to be? What has been perhaps that impact of those softer kind of measures? Okay, thank you. I'll come to another question. What flexible structures have been used as an example, and how have they worked or challenges faced? Biggest challenge is continuity of communication between flexible members of the team, especially with construction managers. But any thoughts on kind of that challenge of continuity of communication? One could share.
I think for me, I think that needs to be, one of the challenges that we are having is really what we want is flexibility for everyone, including construction managers, and that's been one of the roles that you could say is the hardest because they're the front line and they're out there. But actually, thinking about what we've talked about already in terms of productivity, if you've got a team, you can use a team-based approach. So we can, there is flexibility for everyone, and that's certainly our vision here that we will have flexibility for everyone. I think it really comes down to good communication and planning. Those are probably the two fundamental things that we found. So we've got a few things to combat that. So planning tools, however you do that, through Teams planning or your team meetings, or particularly, we're great at planning. We're a project-based business, and we've got a lot of problem solvers here. So we love to plan, we love to project manage. It's in our DNA. So actually, this is no different, in my view, to managing your project and all of the other complexities that you have for your program to your logistics. So I think if you can really embed it as part of, not as a sideline, but fundamentally as part of your project planning, use planning tools, have really good communication with your teams, maybe have a buddy, the person who's working flex might have a flex buddy that would be covering for them as another solution that we put in place. So things such as that, I think you can really, you can combat that with really good planning and really good communication amongst the team, and very transparent as well. There's none of this sort of behind closed doors and different deals for different people. It's really got to be very consistent and very open, and I think that will drive the culture change.
Yeah, absolutely. And you reminded me of something else as well, Catherine, where I saw, it might have been with you guys, that we were talking about the kind of start and end of day briefings as well, and thinking about just re-looking at what time do they need to happen and what's important in those meetings, so that we can ensure if people are working in a flexible way, you still have that continuity of briefing, so everyone on site knows exactly what's due to happen on site that day, who needs to be where, what are we expecting, you know, what suppliers are on site today, etc., etc. But actually, as part of that planning, thinking about, does that meeting really need to be at 5 o'clock at night? Not necessarily. It could happen just as easily at 3 p.m. Planning in advance for the next day. So what kind of things could you tweak and change in your normal ways of working to enable that continuity to continue? Mm-hmm. We've had a question about inspections to be completed on site. I'm not sure we can answer that question because I think it's quite a specific one. I'll try and come back to you individually. It's if there's a process in place where inspections are detailed to be completed on site as hold points. Therefore, quality drives flexibility rather than productivity. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, if I'm honest. Sorry, Jeremy. So I will perhaps come back to you separately. There was a question earlier on today that I would like us to ask, though, to answer rather, which is, what do you do on small sites? So often we have we have a sort of perception, whether it's a reality, it'd be interesting to see, that on larger construction sites where you have a lot of people, it's much easier to flex because there are simply more people to be able to provide that cover. So what do you do on your smaller sites? So where you maybe only have, I don't know, 10, 20 people, how can you support those to have flex? Does anyone have any examples they would like to share for us, please? Hannah smiling, Thomas, I'm feeling like you two have some examples here. Hannah, go.
Yeah, just really quickly, we do have a few small sites, and some even smaller than 10 or 20, kind of 2 or 3 people sites. What we heard was sometimes that makes it easier. There's less people to get around. They can just do it a bit more quickly and between themselves. Where it becomes a challenge is where you've not got enough people to provide the cover. So in those circumstances, we looked at trying to pair up the smaller sites with sites geographically close to them to see if they could offer some cross cover and flex, which seemed to work really nicely. So some saying it was easier, and some ideas there around sharing across site to help worked.
Yeah, I've heard where there was a roving site manager on one site. So it was, I think it was schools within a certain area. All the schools were designed to the same spec, etc. But there was a roving site manager that allowed other site managers to have a bit more flex, so they didn't need to physically be there every time.
Yeah, our smaller sites for schools as well, where that worked.
Yeah, thank you. Thomas, I think you had going to say something.
Oh, definitely more challenging, I would say. For some of the smaller sites where we would have an NI water project and there's maybe only 4 or 5 people, so that generally became more of a challenge. But it's about those guys actually just working together and supporting each other and being open with each other in terms of if they need a way for a parent-teacher meeting or whatever, just about ensuring that there is cover from a health and safety perspective, that there isn't anyone doing lone working and things like that. So again, some very basic but practical solutions in terms of those guys actually are already working together and doing that, some of those things. In terms of then what I would call the smaller projects with maybe the 10 to 15 people, I totally agree that we would find that it's probably easier for those guys to control schedules, look at the program, because they're more in control. There's less maybe in terms of the supply chain, there's less dynamics there, so it can be easier. So it was more for them, maybe the sites with less than 5 people, where we were actually supporting and engaging and talking to those people in terms of, well, how can you work together? How can you support each other? Do you all have to be there 14 hours a day? Again, those conversations. how many people do you actually have to be there as a bare minimum from a health and safety and quality perspective? Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we've just got a few minutes left. So I'm going to ask one final question and ask you all to kind of to chip in, please. So what advice would you give to anyone that is thinking about starting this kind of journey towards flexibility? What piece of advice would you give to them? So Catherine, I'll come to you first, if I can, please.
Yeah, so in summary, I would probably say be bold. I think one of the fears here has been, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if things happen that are not what we expect? That's okay. And I think part of that is being bold. So that's been the encouragement and the advice that I've offered right the way through. You know, it can be undone. We can change it. We can adapt basically. And we need to be agile. This is not fixed and set in stone. So that's probably the best piece is go for it. Try something. Something's better than nothing. And we're still sort of inching forward in the industry together to make a difference.
Thank you. Thomas?
The challenge, I would say. So challenge the people that need challenged and will know who they are. So there are people out there, there are people within your organization that will need to be challenged in terms of that behavioral change, in terms of culturally and everything else. We've always done it this way, or it's too employee led, or those mindsets need to be challenged in terms of we need to be a much more rounded organization. Obviously looking at what our values are, how that feeds into the attraction and retention of staff, which obviously feeds into our wellbeing initiatives. So it's a holistic approach to the people and obviously people being our number one focus, and that delivery piece, and ensuring that they can be the best that they possibly can be. I'm getting tongue-tied. Never good.
Thanks, Doris. Alpa.
So I think I'd probably reinforce a couple of points that have already been made. So I think for me, it's around being open and transparent. I think being really open and transparent and being clear about what we're trying to do. Making sure it's holistic so that it's integrated into a wider program around inclusion, because I think that has got to be part of the debate, part of the conversation. And I think just being bold, not being afraid to try new things, be experiential, test it out. It may not work, try it on a smaller scale, maybe pilot something. And if it doesn't work, or if there's some learning from that, then you can use that learning to move on. But I think, it takes time. And I guess in terms of my personal experience, it's very much around trying to work with others and taking them on that journey and having those conversations.
Thank you. Hannah.
Yeah, I think some similarities as well. Excuse me. I think for me, being clear on what your aims and intentions are for the work that you're doing with them, and it's a little bit what Thomas said around challenging. So when things get difficult, because they probably will, because it's new and it's change, is bringing leaders and managers in the business and people back to why are we doing this? Why is it important? And really being persistent, I guess, in that, and helping them to see and try a different way.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. My final piece of advice would be to just make a start. What we've heard today is that small changes can have a massive impact on people. So my kind of final advice would be just start somewhere. We at Timewise, obviously this is what we do. We offer support with flexible working. We have lots of resources. We do lots of research on this. So please visit our website and have a look at some of the insights and research on there. And I think that probably brings me to just conclude today and say thank you to all of the panelists. It's been brilliant to hear what you've done so far, where you are in your journey, what some of those key challenges are and how you've overcome them. And I really do think it will be valuable for everyone that's joined us today. So for those who have been able to join us, thank you so much for your time. And the recording will be sent to you after the event, I believe. Thank you, everyone.